Welcome to Barnsley. Barnsley has a thriving community today, but also a past to be proud of. A huge part of that past is, of course, its coal mining story. Barnsley has a huge part to play in the coal mining story of Britain, and you can't get any closer to that story than when you're here at the site of Barnsley Main. These buildings here aren't just relics of a time gone by. This is some of the best surviving architecture, some of the best surviving evidence of the coal mining heritage that makes up a lot of the rich history of this local area. But how did it come to be? What's its story? And also, what is the story of coal mining in general? Why is it so important? Why must we remember it? To find out these answers, to quote Julie Andrews, let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. Now a town with a population of over 96,000 people, Barnsley had much more humble origins. Originally in the parish of Silkstone and called Barnsley in the Domesday Book, it only had a much less impressive population of about 200 people. It then started to develop from 1150 when monks from Pontefract Priory built a town where 3 roads met. Then in 1249 it was granted a royal charter, meaning markets could be held. It then flourished as a market town in the following centuries. It was also a centre of manufacturing, with glassmaking and linen weaving being renowned industries. However, it was coal that really helped put Barnsley on the map. Coal has been a huge part of the UK's culture for much longer than you may think. There is evidence that coal was being used in prehistoric Britain over 5,000 years ago. Then, in the Roman period of Britain, coal was being used to heat places such as public baths or the houses of rich families. In around 1215, coal was being taken from exposed seams in the sea and was being traded in Scotland and northern England. However, coal was being dug directly from the ground as early as the 1300s. However, coal mining didn't really take off until the Industrial Revolution. Primitive coal excavation techniques such as bell pits and gin pits were becoming outdated because the need for coal grew so tremendously. Coal was so important to the UK because it fulfilled numerous purposes. This ranged from heating the homes, to powering the furnaces, to fueling the ships and the trains. In 1750, the country was producing over 5.2 million tonnes per year. In 1850, it rose to 62.5 million, and in the 1960s, it was producing a staggering 177 million tonnes, employing over 500,000 people. It's inarguable just how encompassing this industry really was. Coal had been mined from the South Yorkshire coalfield from around the 14th century, with the Barnsley bed being the most well-known seam. Owing to the location of the coalfields in this area, coal mining became one of the major industries in the north. It was also incredibly important for fueling the furnaces of the iron and steel factories that made here the industrial powerhouse that it once was. There's been mining in the borough of Barnsley for centuries, with Elsica Old Collar, for example, being sunk by 1750. By 1960, there were over 30 collieries working the Barnsley coalfield, and of course Barnsley Main was one of them. This site is of great historical significance nationally and internationally for the complete nature of the structures here. One of the most recognisable parts, the steel headstock, comes from after 1947. The brickwork of the engine house dates back to different periods, with some stretching back as far as the early 1900s. Other notable places to see here are the tub tracks, which would have taken timber to the engine house. Pit ponies were vital for pulling the tubs. Speaking of timber as well, there's also the timber yard here. The timber would have been stacked here and then taken in the tubs to the mine to be used to prop up the tunnels to stop them from collapsing. There's also the muck stack, which was the place where waste and muck from the pit would have been put. It's been planted with oaks in recent times and provides a home for the local ecosystem. There has been deep mining on this site since the 1830s. In 1824, the Ardsley Mining Company sank its first shafts. It was originally known as Oaks, given the number of oak trees that were nearby. In 1889, it was purchased by Dan Rylands, a local glass bottle businessman. It was at this time it was known as Rylands Main. Then, in 1890, Barnsley Main Limited was incorporated, and it seemed that the pit started to develop much more. In 1892, electric lighting was installed. In 1904, coking ovens were installed. It seemed like the pit was always on the up and up. However, it was not an easy journey, and there were plenty of casualties along the way. We must remember, mining was a proud profession, but also a dangerous one. From 1700 to 2000, it is believed over 164,000 people died in the mining industry. Tragedy, accident and death were at many pits, including here. Mining was a very dangerous job owing to several threats, ranging from immediate threats such as tunnel collapses and long-term issues such as respiratory diseases. There were unfortunately very many accidents here at this site. In 1845, for example, 3 men were killed in a gas explosion. Gas explosions occurred when things such as combustible dust and flammable gases came into contact with a source of heat. Methane gas was quite prominent in pits as it was a byproduct of coal, and that 1845 accident was just the first of many. In 1845, a fire damaged the headgear in the ventilation shaft. In 1847, at 3 AM, a huge explosion was heard by people on the surface. This one explosion had taken the lives of 73 men and boys, with the youngest believed to have been William Carlton at just 10 years old. In 1942, 12 men were killed in an explosion, and in 1947, a fire damp explosion took the lives of 9 men and injured 21 more. Fire damp was naturally occurring gases in mines, predominantly consisting of methane. It's right in saying that this place has seen its fair share of horrors. There was also the nearby Huscar pit disaster, which saw 26 children drowned in the Huscar pit, aged between 7 and 17, after heavy rainfall and a stream had burst its banks. The children's bodies were buried together in the churchyard of All Saints Church in Silkstone. This disaster led to the 1842 Mines Act, which banned any women, girls or any boys under the age of 10 from working in the pits. Here at the Barnsley Main site, however, around 28 years later, one of the darkest times in Barnsley's story was about to unfold. The Oaks Colliery disaster of 1866, the deadliest mining disaster in English history. It was a grave time in British heritage and a stark reminder of just how deadly this industry could be. Now, Oak Colliery was already infamous for being an unsafe and gassy mine. In fact, in 1856, the workers from here went on strike over the unsafe conditions. Nevertheless, work continued, and on the 12th of December 1866, the workers paid the highest price for the dangerous conditions. A fire damp explosion tore through the pit at 1:15 p.m, causing mass destruction and death. However, this was the first day of misery for the communities, as rescue efforts in the following days brought disaster with them as well. On the 13th, a party of volunteer rescuers descended into the colliery to try and save lives. In that party was a certain Parkin Jeffcock, a mining engineer, who died when another explosion occurred. On the 14th, another rescue party went in to save the sole survivor of the group that Parkin went into the colliery with. More explosions happened in the colliery over the course of the next few days. Matthew Hay, the night fireman, actually saved 90 more lives when he stopped the people from going into the colliery after noticing a change in wind, which led to poor ventilation and even more explosions. With the pit still alight and numerous explosions still occurring on the 15th, the pit was sealed to try and extinguish the fire. It was to be the deadliest English mining disaster, with around 380 men and boys having lost their lives to the explosion. The nearby Ash Row saw every house but one lose at least one family member. There was a memorial erected in 1879 and paid for by public subscription, located at Christ Church in Ardsley. There's also a memorial in Barnsley Town Centre as well, showing just how long-lasting and still painful the memory of this tragedy really is. The Great Depression hit and the Hoyle Mill section of the site was closed. It was in 1933 when Barnsley Main and Barrow Colliery were amalgamated. Barrow Colliery was a pit in Worsborough that operated for 109 years until it closed in 1985. It was in 1947 that Barnsley Main became a part of the National Coal Board. In the First and Second World Wars, the coal mines were taken under government control. Given how important coal was to the nation, it is no surprise that there was a shortage following the Second World War. The Coal Industry Nationalisation Act of 1946 saw the creation of the National Coal Board. Freezing weather and fuel shortages saw a tremendous energy crisis in 1947. On the 1st of January on that year, the National Coal Board took over every colliery in Britain, and a sign was put up at each site to remind people of that decision. The National Coal Board became the British Coal Corporation in 1987, before it was effectively closed a decade later. It was from 1966 onwards that Barnsley Main, along with a lot of other mining sites in Barnsley, and indeed the nation too, started to see a decline. It temporarily closed in 1966 before being reopened yet again in 1970 to gain access to Barrow Colliery. Ultimately, however, Barnsley Main stopped production in 1991, in the same year that the Soviet Union collapsed. Barnsley Main has seen its fair share of tragedies throughout the years, with lesser known events happening, such as in 1918 when one of the buckets from the aerial ropeway fell down, struck and killed the 64-year-old collier Stephen Harper. However, it's also seen its fair share of community spirit, such as in 1915 during the First World War, when Belgian refugees came here to help work on the surface of the pit. Plus, by 1947, it was reaching an output of 1,200 tonnes of coal a day. Despite ceasing operations in 1991, Barnsley Main still has a future. In 2016, Barnsley Main Heritage Group was formed, and they've done a smashing job of keeping the history alive.